It was the kind of morning you never think will be your last with someone. The scent of toasted bread filled the kitchen, mingling with the subtle bitterness of freshly brewed coffee. My father hummed an old tune under his breath, something from the war, I think, while buttering both sides of his toast, just like he always did. I sat across from him at our worn mahogany table, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone, occasionally glancing up to match his half-smile. "Big meeting today?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. He nodded, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the microwave. "Always, but it's just another day. The kind you forget, unless something makes you remember." I didn't know what he meant then, but now I play that sentence in my mind like a broken record. Our family business had been his life's work, an auto parts company he built from a single garage with nothing but grit, second-hand tools, and stubborn optimism. He used to say it was our family's legacy, and one day it would be mine to carry forward. He never said it would come with claws. It wasn't until after the funeral, quiet, simple, per his wishes, that the shift began. Not in the weather, not in the flowers or faces. It was her, my stepmother, Alina, always perfectly composed. I remember she didn't cry, not even once. Not when the casket lowered, not when they folded the flag and placed it into my hands. Instead of hers, she just stood there, watching, calculating. They married when I was 15. She had a soft voice, the kind that made you want to lean in. My dad said she was the calm. After the storm, after Mom died, I wanted to believe him, I tried, but there was always something in her eyes, like still water that runs too deep. For years, she played her part well. Sunday dinners, birthday cakes, those half-hearted hugs, that looked better in photos than they felt. I kept my distance. She never pushed. It was a truce we both honored until he was gone. It started with small things, mail addressed differently, bank statements I never saw again, whispers among board members that never reached my ears. The office, once warm with my father's messy handwriting and framed pictures of us on fishing trips, slowly became sterile. Cold. One morning, I drove to the company headquarters, same as I always had. My badge didn't work. The front desk assistant, new, unfamiliar, looked at me like I didn't belong. "You'll need to schedule an appointment," she said without looking up. An appointment, I laughed, but no one else did. That was the moment I realized I wasn't paranoid. I was being erased. I drove home, her home, or what used to be. Elena's car was parked out front like it had always belonged more than mine. Inside, the walls looked different. His things had disappeared. His chair replaced. Our family portrait gone. I went to my old room, still locked, still untouched. But his study was closed. A keycard panel blinked red where a doorknob used to be. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't even know when that was installed. Something was wrong. Not just grief, not just transition. There was a plan in motion, and I wasn't in it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the conversations we didn't have, the ones he must had with her instead. The legal documents I never read. The company meetings I was excused from under the pretense of finishing school. Was he preparing me or protecting me? And from what? I decided I wasn't going to wait for answers anymore. My father always said, if you want to know the truth, look where no one wants you to. So, I started looking. The first clue came in the form of a registered letter, hand-delivered by someone in a suit I didn't recognize. It was thick, heavy, too formal for comfort. Inside, legal jargon wrapped in velvet gloves. Alina was now the acting CEO, not interim, not temporary. Acting as in, without contest. I sat on the edge of my bed, reading the letter under the jaundiced glow of my desk lamp, my eyes tracing the unfamiliar signature of a law firm I didn't know existed. How when she hadn't just stepped into my father's shoes, she'd sealed every door behind her, locked the legacy, changed the locks, claimed the name. I went to the office the next morning, heart pounding with disbelief disguised as hope. Maybe it was all a mistake. Maybe someone sent the wrong letter. But as I stepped off the elevator, the change was palpable. The nameplate on the corner office door had changed. Alina R. Whitmore, CEO, my last name, not hers. And yet there, it was etched in glass like a scar I couldn't scrub away. I reached for the door handle. Locked. A security keypad blinked red again. That same assistant from last week appeared behind me, clipboard in hand. Ms. Whitmore isn't available today. I turned. I didn't ask for an appointment. This is my father's company. She raised an eyebrow. The company is under new management. You'll need to direct any inquiries to our legal department. Clenched my jaw. I am the legal department. But even as I said it, I realized I wasn't. I never had been in the months before my father died. He'd started moving things behind the curtain. Quietly, Alina had power of attorney, access to corporate filings, and now, according to the records I managed to scrape from the county website, she also had controlling interest. He'd signed it over, but why? Out of love, trust. Was he coerced? Or was it just oversight of father, protecting his family in the only way he knew how, never suspecting the enemy lived under his roof? The hardest part was knowing that I had no proof, just gut instinct and a growing sense of betrayal. I began digging. Late nights, early mornings, pulling old files, calling board members who no longer returned my calls, visiting courthouses, public records offices, anywhere that still had paper trails, and every road led to the same place, Alina, her name on every form, her signature on every transfer, her fingerprints all over what used to be ours. But there was one document I couldn't find, my father's final will. And I had a feeling that whatever truth I was looking for, whatever weapon she was using to hold the entire company hostage, it was in that will dot, or in whatever version of it she didn't want me to see. The study, the locked study, it had always been his sanctuary. He kept physical copies of everything, wills, contracts, letters never sent. If I was going to find the truth, I needed to get in, and I needed someone who knew how to pick a lock without asking too many questions. That night, I made a call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My cousin, Caleb, the family's black sheep, hacker turned hardware genius. I need your help, I told him. There was silence on the line, then a low chuckle. I figured it wouldn't take long before Alina started erasing more than just names. When do we break in? I didn't answer, because I already had, and I knew that once we opened that door, there was no going back. Asterisk. The next morning, I was at the front gate of Whitmore and Langley, the law firm Alina used. I had memorized the name from the envelope, sleek, embossed lettering on thick, cream cardstock. It felt like something pulled from a time when people dueled with pistols at dawn to settle estates. It didn't belong to me. It didn't belong to my father. It belonged to her. A receptionist greeted me with that too-bright tone, reserved for uninvited guests. Do you have an appointment? No, but I think you'll want to tell Mr. Langley I'm here. My name is Rachel Whitmore. A pause. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she disappeared into the back. Minutes later, I was led down a long corridor of frosted glass and expensive silence. They put me in a room to clean to trust sterile walls, a tray of untouched water bottles, and a single chair facing an empty desk. Then he walked in, Julian Langley, mid-40s, perfectly tailored suit, salt and pepper hair that probably had its own PR team, and a smile, not a kind smile. The kind that says, "I've already won, but I'll let you feel heard." "Ms. Whitmore," he said, extending a hand I didn't take. "We've been expecting you." I sat down slowly. "That's interesting. I wasn't expecting me." He chuckled softly and took the seat across from me, folding his hands like a priest ready to give last rites. "I understand this must be difficult. Losing a parent? Yes. Watching someone hijack his legacy while pretending to grieve? Also difficult." His smile didn't budge. "I assure you, everything has been conducted fully within the bounds of the law." "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night?" He tapped a manila folder. My father's name was typed neatly on the corner. "Your father left very specific instructions. Alina was designated as the executor and primary beneficiary. The transition has followed every legal requirement." I leaned forward. "Show me the will, the original, not the version that's been curated for public consumption." He slid the folder toward me but didn't open it. "I'm afraid that's not possible." "Why? Because it doesn't exist? Or because it says something you don't want me to see?" His eyes sharpened. Just for a second, a crack in the porcelain. "Because, Ms. Whitmore, the will is sealed. By request of your father. For your protection." I laughed, a dry, bitter thing. Funny how everyone's so invested in protecting me from the truth. Your father was a man of vision. He anticipated challenges, emotional volatility. That's why he empowered Alina to ensure stability. No, he empowered her because you coached him too. You fed him legal smoke and mirrors while she whispered in his ear. He tilted his head slightly, like a man studying a museum artifact. "You're grieving, you're angry. Understandably, but accusations won't change the facts." I stared at him, at the folder, at the locked room in our home, still waiting for Caleb. "I'll find the truth, Mr. Langley. Whether it's in your pristine little file room or behind a locked door. And when I do, I hope your smile is still this smug." He stood. "Ms. Whitmore, I do hope you understand that pushing too hard may result in consequences. Legal ones." I stood too. "You mean the kind that come with handcuffs? Or just more polite letters dressed up as nooses?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The room had already said enough. Back outside, I let the cold slap me fully awake. I felt like I'd stepped into a play I didn't audition for, where the script was written by everyone but me. But that was about to change. By the time I got home, Caleb was already there. Hood up, backpack slung over one shoulder, eating a banana like he was just visiting for Thanksgiving. "You look like hell," he said. "I feel like it." "Good. That means you're ready." We didn't say much after that. Just stood in front of the study door, red light blinking, silence thick as fog. "What do you think's behind it?" he asked. "The truth, or something close enough to burn?" He smiled, not smug like Langley's, but wild, free. "Let's crack it open then." And just like that, the lock began to blink green. Alina set the table with deliberate, grace-polished silverware, crystal glasses, napkins folded into perfect triangles. Classical music hummed low from the built-in speakers, and the roast lamb smelled divine, which only made it worse. She'd invited me to dinner like nothing had happened, like we were still some fragile family unit glued together by ghost memories and porcelain civility, like she hadn't rewritten the future with a signature. I walked in with a folder under my arm. "Rachel," she said with that rehearsed warmth, "I thought we could eat like we used to. Just you and me. No lawyers." "Perfect," I replied, taking a seat, "because I brought a little something to him." She poured the wine, my father's favorite red from a vintage he used to collect. I didn't touch it. "You look tired," she said, slicing into the lamb. "I broke into Dad's study today with Caleb." The knife froze halfway down. "That room was locked for a reason, Rachel." "Yeah, turns out the reason was guilt." I placed the folder on the table, flipping it open with a quiet precision that cut, sharper than steel. Inside were the copies, both wills, side by side. The dates, the signatures, the notary stamps. "You forged the second one, or pressured him into it when he was barely lucid." The handwriting, it's shaky. The phrasing, not his, her. Eyes didn't flicker, not even once. That was scarier than rage. You're upset, you're grieving, and you're reading into things. That's rich coming from the woman who hijacked a company while the body was still warm. She took a sip of wine, calm as a lake. I took responsibility. I kept things from collapsing. "Your father entrusted me with his life's work. He entrusted me with the truth." I slid the letter forward, the one we found in the study, still scented faintly of old books and regret. "He knew you were going to do this. That's why he wrote this. Because even under morphine and fear, he saw you." Her fingers trembled now. "Slightly. You have no proof any of this will stand in court." "I don't need it to. Not yet." She tilted her head. "Then what do you want, Rachel? To see your face when you realize the game is over?" And for a moment, just a flick of the mask cracked, her voice dropped. "You think you can undo what I've built with one dinner and a dusty folder? You're still the girl who ran away when things got hard. And you're still the woman who marries into empires she didn't build." We sat in silence. The lamb cooled. The wine darkened in untouched glasses. Then she smiled too wide, too controlled. "You want war, Rachel?" "No, I want justice. But I'll settle for watching your kingdom fall apart one lie at a time." I stood up, took my folder, and left her alone in her perfectly set dining room. Classical music still playing, like the funeral hadn't ended, like the reckoning had only just begun. The next morning didn't begin with sunlight. It began with silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that lingers after an explosion, when the smoke is still clearing and no one's quite sure what survived. I stared at the empty seat across from me at the breakfast table, the same place my father used to sit, newspaper folded just so, coffee, black and silent like him. Caleb sat beside me, scrolling absently through his phone, pretending not to watch me. Last night's dinner confrontation played on loop in my head. Elena's face when I slid the original will across the table. Julian Langley's voice rising ever so slightly, just enough to betray his perfect poise. My own voice trembling not from fear, but from fury finally freed. She had tried to play calm at first, denied everything, then blamed grief, then accused me of forging it. But the letter from my father, that changed everything. Even she couldn't talk her way around his handwriting, his regret, his apology, his clear instructions to give the company not just the title, but the legacy back to me. And then, when cornered, Alina had laughed. Not a kind laugh, the laugh of someone who knows she's drowning but plans to take you with her. "You think that piece of paper will fix everything?" she had said, eyes glinting like broken glass. "This family is built on control, Rachel, not love, and you're just as ruthless as he was." Maybe worse. I hadn't replied, because maybe I was. But the difference was, knew it. Now, I stared at my plate, untouched. "Want me to drive you to the lawyers?" Caleb asked. I shook my head. "I need to do this alone." He didn't. Pushed at Whitmore and Langley. Julian Langley was less smug, noticeably so. "Ms. Whitmore," he greeted, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. "I'm filing a petition to contest the previous will, based on evidence of undue influence, forgery, and mental incapacity at the time of signing." He didn't argue, just nodded, as if he had expected this. "Alina won't go quietly. She doesn't have to. The truth will speak louder." Julian glanced at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw it. Not pity, not condescension, but respect. The begrudging kind. The kind a wolf gives another when it realizes it's not the only predator in the room. Back home, the study had become my command center. Files spread across the desk. Meeting notes, plans. Alina hadn't left the house yet. She lingered, a ghost refusing to fade. But this time, I didn't flinch when I passed her in the hall. "Enjoying your new throne," she muttered. I stopped. "It's not a throne. It's a responsibility. One I didn't ask for. One I won't abandon." She scoffed. "You really think this is over?" "No," I said. "But I'm not afraid of you anymore." And that was the beginning of the end. Not of the war, but of the silence. Because now I had a voice, and the truth was finally listening. The ruling came on a Thursday. A grey envelope, hand-delivered by Gwen's paralegal, resting on the kitchen counter like it didn't carry the weight of generations. I stared at it for 5 minutes before opening it. Caleb stood behind me. Silent support, solid as ever. The judge had ruled in my favor. The original will was deemed invalid, signed under undue influence, and while my father was medically impaired, the second will, the one we found locked away with my father's final letter, was upheld. The company would return to me, but it wasn't celebration I felt. It was release, grief, held too long behind clenched fists, now spilling out in silent tears. Caleb didn't speak, just reached out and wrapped his arms around me, like a dam finally, giving way to the flood. Weeks passed. The house grew quieter, not from tension, but from absence. Alina moved out 2 days after the ruling. No dramatic goodbye, no final threats, just gone. She left behind a silk scarf in the upstairs closet, a glass perfume bottle, half full, and a photograph, my father, her, and me, taken before everything fell apart. I didn't throw it away. I didn't forgive her, but I didn't hate her either. Hate is a tether, and I was done being tied to her. I walked into the office the next morning, our family's company, once again ours. The staff stood waiting, some nervous, some relieved, all watching. I didn't give a speech, I just nodded. Then I got to work. We changed the nameplate on the door, reinstated 2 board members who had been ousted, increased transparency in our reporting, started a scholarship fund in my father's name. Small things, but important. One afternoon, I found an old photo of my dad in the storage room. He was younger, sleeves rolled up, laughing over blueprints with his co-founder. I hung it above my desk. That's who I wanted to remember. Not the man in the hospital bed. Not the bitter silences of our final conversations, but the man who built something, who believed at least in the end that I could carry it forward. A journalist called months later, asking for a quote, wanted to do a feature on women reclaiming legacies. What did you save? She asked me. I paused. Not the company, I said. That's just buildings and shares. I saved the truth. I saved my voice. And maybe, in some way, I saved the version of my father that still believed in me. She didn't say anything. But when the article came out, the headline read, "She fought for a company but won herself back." And maybe that was the real legacy. Not what I inherited, but who I became when I refused to be erased.